murder this one and murder that one. Talking all that bullshit. I'ma put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me, I bet you wish you was me, I know that I know.
Poppin' everybody, and welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast, where you know it's me and my only friends, which includes, but is not limited to, my boy Matt Hunt.
Hey, Conrad.
How are you today, Mr. Hunt?
I'm doing well. That was a bit of a unique intro. I've never heard you do it like that before.
Sometimes shit goes down like this.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to be a bit more calm, a bit more chill, you know?
How you feeling today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. You been in the streets lately?
A little bit, yeah. I was going to get out to Venetian later on today, but I got some other real life stuff to do instead. But we'll be out there tomorrow.
Yeah, real
Poker is life.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Yeah, that's probably true. But
it's 1,600, 400K, right?
yeah, 1,600 something. I don't know.
It's a
just tell me
400K.
it's 1,600 and I show up, and you know, however much the prize pool is, we'll just see how it ends up.
Nice, sounds good.
Yeah, should be good. What about you?
I'm chilling. You know,
You're not in the streets?
possibly I might play Saturday.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
What are you doing over there, Burke? How's that?
Your job.
Sidekick's getting prepped over here.
You know, people gotta do shit. How you doing, Lamanna? Did you play at the Julie yesterday?
We did. They got me good. It's okay.
They got you?
Sometimes you run in the nuts a bunch of times. And
Oh
then,
yeah, Guapo said they fucked you bad.
whatever.
He came in and he had
You
this
know
whole
what?
depressing thing about how he felt bad for you.
You know,
didn't go that far.
Guapo's, yeah. I think it's funny because when Guapo plays, whether he wins or loses, I think his emotions stay intact. But when one of his friends wins or loses, his emotions are all over the place. Like, I can come in and be like, I won $300, which is like half a buy. And he's like, that's amazing. Yes, way to go. And I'm like, hey, I also lost half a buy the day before. Oh, my God. Jeez.
Help
I'm
me out,
sorry,
Landon.
B.
Is that
I'm
empathy
sorry,
or
man.
sympathy?
I think it's sympathy. I don't because
Do you feel patronized?
because when when this happens to you, you don't feel that emotion, so you're not empathizing. You're just sorry for me for
Okay.
losing, or happy for me for
I
winning.
think we've had this conversation before, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes you a pretty good railbird there. If you're really, you know, you're feeling it with the person who's
Oh,
playing.
I get it. I'm the professional railbird, so
That's true. You've probably been
I
on the
get
rail
hyped
of
up, yeah.
so many WSOP final tables at this point.
Exactly. Yeah.
We got to get you to a final table yourself so we can all rail you.
He
One of
almost
these
did it
days,
last
Matt.
year.
One of these days. I almost did it. Yeah.
Yeah, you did. It was a Colossus, wasn't it?
It was Colossus. Well, you know, we got World Series schedules coming up pretty soon.
That is
so,
true. This is a good segue.
yeah.
Absolutely. We're probably about a day away, I think.
I think we are.
According to the legend himself, Kev Math, it's
Kev
going to be
Math,
tomorrow.
yep.
I was thinking about this on my walk with the dogs today.
Your schedule, your WPP schedule.
Well, just the schedule in general. And it dawned on me. And I was trying to basically juggle two thoughts at once of, is this a me thing or is this a WSOP thing? But it really occurred to me that I just don't care about the schedule at all.
We know. We
no,
know.
but like,
We know.
but not because I'm not planning on playing a big.
Because you just
schedule.
know the ones that you're going to play are going to be on there, and there's nothing else.
You live around the corner.
I
You
don't
don't
even
have
know
to
if it's
plan
that.
for anything. It's just you just show up. It's
No.
just schedule comes out and you show
No,
up.
no. It's none of that. Think about in the past. I mean, even maybe now you get pretty hyped about the schedule. It wasn't about the events that were being listed or anything like that, right? It was the World Series is here.
Do we know the dates for it?
It's always the same. Last week of May through mid-July.
Yeah, I think they have the dates for the main. I think it's like the 3rd of July to the 17th
Right.
or something
Same
like
thing
that.
every year.
How is
Yeah,
it the
it's the same every
3rd
year.
through the 17th?
What's a
Same thing
10-day
every year.
event?
It's 10 days of play, 4-day ones. It takes 2 weeks.
Yeah.
10
10
It's like that
days?
every year.
Yeah.
Every
Day 10, you win the event.
Mm-hmm.
Landon hasn't made it out of day one, guys. you
Yeah.
know.
Remember they
He's
break.
young.
It's a one-day
Remember they
tournament.
break the final table up into 2 or 3 days. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
it used to be 2,
It
now
used-
it's 3, I think.
Yeah, I
to be
think it's
3, now
9 to
it's 2.
6, 6 to 3, 3 to winner.
Right. But before that didn't happen.
Well,
Then it was
always,
like a
it was
9-day
always 2
event, or-
days.
yeah.
Yeah, it was 9 before.
8 or 9 day event.
Yeah, no, it's not about any of those things. It's that for me, I'm not in a place where, and so maybe I'm answering my own question. Maybe this is just a me thing, but this doesn't represent Christmas to me as a poker player anymore. Like,
did it used to?
Yeah, it was the biggest opportunity of the year. Half of your win rate, if you were really good, would either be won or lost during the World Series.
I think this just means that you made it, man.
Yeah, right.
Maybe.
You graduated into the high stakes nosebleeds. That's your Christmas, which is now year round.
Like every day you get to play Bobby's, you're fucking thrilled.
Yeah. It's so
right.
much fun.
Right, exactly. Where like you know that this is not going to make or break your year. You know, obviously there's the games are going to be lucrative.
But like I get excited for the WPT championship at the end of the year.
Kind of, but you know that's the only thing there. It's like the end of the year.
It's only one tournament also that you're going to play.
Yeah.
I'm only going to play one during the World Series too.
You're going to
only playing the main?
I mean,
he does
don't hold me to it.
He does this every year. He's got to play more. He's got to play the 25K 6 max.
No,
He's going to play.
I learned my lesson there. It's never as soft as they advertise it to be.
We'll see him there.
He says
It's
that.
soft for you.
He does this every year.
He says
study.
that, and then he'll see how many people are entering it, and he'll be like, "How can I not play? There's 300."
No,
I'll tell you
what's
what.
gonna happen
I'll
is
tell you
you're
what.
gonna see somebody that like you don't think is that great bag a ton,
Doesn't
and just
matter.
be like, you know what?
I regret playing the 25K 6 max, and I regret only once last year.
Okay.
And I regret not playing the 25K 8 max towards the end of the summer. The 25K 6 max was a reg fest.
Are you
it was
gonna
such a
play-
You're
tough
gonna
field.
swap this year?
No, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to go play cash.
Question: Are you gonna play the 25K heads up?
No. No.
What do you mean no?
You should play that.
It just doesn't interest me.
Are
at
you
all.
gonna? What would,
Here's
is
why it
kinda
doesn't.
cool.
No,
Round
here's why it
one.
doesn't interest me. I'm not good, so I'm going in as a dog. But even knowing that, I know that I can't be a big dog because it's just heads up tournament structure.
Let me
right?
ask you this, Burke. The schedule's coming out tomorrow, right? What would be, if this even exists, your dream tournament that you would see on there that you'd be like, wow, that's really cool. I'm actually excited to play that. What would it look like?
25K, start with 10 big blinds, 7-minute levels. Let's fucking go.
10K flip and go.
Something realistic.
Yeah, definitely 10K flip and go.
Would you be in for 40
40 what?
bullets?
How rich do you think I am?
400K.
I think I would be excited to see a like 10K 6 max mystery bounty.
They had that last
They
year,
had
right?
that.
No,
They had a
did
secret
not.
bounty, and they didn't know what
It
the
was
prize
not
pool
It
was.
wasn't
max.
6 max. Yeah, it wasn't 6 max.
Yeah,
6 max would be cool.
I think that would be cool.
6 max.
More mystery bounties would interest
better.
me a lot.
Yeah.
If there were like a
Everything
half
mystery
dozen,
bounty.
yeah, if there were like a half dozen mystery bounties, that would
Right.
interest me a lot because it really alters ICM a lot. Where I'm not as big of a dog any longer in the field.
Right.
Maybe they should just, for you alone, they should have something that's no ICM at all, just winner take all, just like 1K buy-in, 1,000 runners, $1 million first place.
I think that would be really. I think more events should be that way, and then they should start facilitating chops. Like I think the easiest way to get like massive turnout, in my opinion, not necessarily for the WSOP, but I think like I'm shocked more small tours don't do this, is just make everything winner take all, but facilitate chops, right? So it's just like, you know, whenever you're talking about these smallish fields, like call it the Venetian 1Ks or whatever, where they're going to pay 18. Fuck it. Let's just make it $1 million up top and then let them start wheeling and dealing whenever you get down. It's a nightmare for the staff.
That's
They would never want to do
right,
it.
Yeah.
That's like going to the roulette table and putting 1,100 on one.
Why?
Because you just,
It'll never play to a winner.
I mean,
People
it
want,
won't, but
and you'll get more fair payouts. So like now you don't have to worry about the bullshitty payout structures that are obviously horrific. Now, granted, like
the
this
chip
could just be
leader-
changed
the
by.
problem is the chip leader would never want, like, would always keep deferring where we start the payouts. Like, so it would
They
be.
can't though.
Yes, they can.
No, if you have 38 big blinds as the chip leader, like you're like just as likely to bust within the next few spots as you are to win the whole fucking thing.
And
Well, what
that
if you have
chip
100
leader-
big blinds as
I
a chip
mean,
leader?
I mean, even with 38 bigs and people have less than you, you're just gonna be like, "Fuck you guys." It's
I
winner
really
takes
think
all.
they should do this in the high roller circuit. Like these small fields
That would
where
be interesting,
there's
yeah.
minimal edge to begin with, just make everything winner take all and then let them figure it out.
That would actually be kind of interesting. Yeah.
Don't they kind of do that anyway when they're short?
Fuck no.
Maybe not make everything
not
that way,
like
but
top
have
lines?
events that do that.
Huh?
Isn't there like a decent amount of chops and like shit like that that happens behind closed doors?
Yeah, of course. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying make it winner take all, and then let them figure out the payout structure. Right? Because now all of a sudden, like if you're 6-handed with like say you're playing a 25K where it's 100 runners and it pays 12 people, and you get down to the final like 9, and you know there are 3 wrecks left. You ain't chopping. Not until they're gone.
When you say,
it would be
when
really
you say
bad.
let them figure it out, you're talking about the actual players.
Yeah. It would actually be really bad for the ecosystem, obviously,
Yeah.
because the recreationals would just get fleeced.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't Triton facilitate something like that?
Wait, are we talking chops or winner take all? I think you guys are saying two different things.
They're talking chop.
I'm
I
talking
don't know.
chops.
Yes,
yeah.
everyone facilitates chops except WSOP.
Oh, okay.
Nobody facilitates a winner take all
Oh, I
format
see.
though,
Mhm.
which I just think would be interesting because
Yeah.
It would
you
just
eliminate-
turn-
It would literally be winner take all until they decide to chop it.
well, you just eliminate ICM completely, so it totally alters the strategy.
I wouldn't say you eliminate it completely because you know that there's probably going to be a chop, and you have to make it to the chop, right? It's like it's very unlikely that it's just going to play down to winner.
Yeah,
take
but you
all.
just couldn't model it. So
It would be harder to model it,
You-
but it would
you're-
still exist.
you're making winner take all decisions until the chop is breached.
Well, you clearly just use WGS, which is whale game simulation.
Correct.
So now you just stay in the tournament until you think the whale gets busted, and
Right.
now you start talking chops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just cheat.
So you say like, okay, like a whale VPIP, like you have to fold because you have to hope someone busts the whale, so now you can chop.
Yeah.
That's strategy.
That's next level. That's the next level of tournament theory.
Yeah.
Keep the whale out of the in the
Or what would end up happening is all the regs would just like uniform swap amongst each other so that they are already chopped. And then you would literally just play it down to a
The
winner.
old swap and
Yeah.
chop.
What about you, Hunt? What are you excited for? What do you want to see? On
I
the
like
schedule?
the idea of more mystery bounties. I think mystery bounties are a great format. I think that I would like to see more 6 max in the schedule. Just a little bit more in the region of the 1K to 3K sort of buy-in range because I think people really like 6 max.
I feel like they
events.
shy away from those just because they take up too much space.
I know. I think that's just the logistical issue. You know, I would like to see what else do we have? I would like to see them branching out a little bit. Obviously, I wouldn't play these events, but I would like to see them running games that haven't yet ever had a bracelet event. I know they just ran a Badoogie one like last year or the year before. I'd like to see them. I think they just started Big O ones as well, but like just experimenting. Like I want. Like, do like a tournament where it's like a 3 blind structure or something.
Yeah.
You know, just do
It would
something
be,
weird.
It
Do
would be
some
really
unusual
smart for them,
ones.
like you said, with the mystery bounds, for them to lean into like the popularity of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, last year I think they had the 1K and then they had the
10K.
big one.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see them have like maybe double that, like 4 or 5 of them spread out among like all the buy-in
Yeah.
ranges. So they always run like these small events, right? They run these $300 tournaments, these $400 tournaments. As a tortoise, I would love to see a small buy-in mystery bound, maybe a $400 where you could pluck
I don't
a
think
half
it's-
a million or something like that.
No,
a
you're not-
quarter a million.
But I don't think that that's the right approach. Like,
Okay, well,
because as you de-escalate the buy-in amount and you start to allocate more to the bounty prize pool,
right.
the rake becomes even more impactful
No,
than it already was.
yeah.
And it's not just that, but also
That's all smaller buy-in tournaments.
yes, that's already there's already a massive amount of rake, but now you're leaving a big portion of the prize pool up to chance as
Yeah.
well. So like you're not
Right.
realizing you're
But people
even-
love that.
I get that, but the point is the rake now becomes much more impactful on the actual skill part of the competition because you're going to over short samples run way almost everyone's going to run below EV on their bounties, right? You can't
But
each bounty ends up being worth for instance in the 10K each bounty was worth $10,000 but only a certain percentage of the field is going to pluck and the majority of them were 5K bounties.
Yeah, but I think when it's just a one-off, once-a-year type of event, then like, and it's going to be fun for everyone, then like I don't think the rake's going to just...
Well, that's the second part is
crush
it's not
you,
as much
you know
fun
what I
as
mean?
you think. You don't get big bounties. You don't get like the meaningful moments of plucking $1 million bounty and a bunch of 100K bounties and stuff like that.
I don't know, man. I mean, I think you'd have I think if you ran a 400, I mean, if you run $1,000 one and you can get 2 $1 million bounties, you would have no problem running a $400 one and getting a $250,000 bounty.
I feel like the issue, and not just like the bounty structure, but the payout structure was like last year during Mystery Millions when Tyler won it. First was $1 million, second was $500K.
Yes.
That's nuts.
Right. And I thought first was actually less than $1 million. I thought they did 2 $1 million bounties and first place was less than that.
Yeah, first was $1 million.
Okay, but either way, you create this huge disparity now in the regular prize pool. And when you're talking about like running a 400, let's say it crushes and does 10,000 runners, right? Now
it would do more, but yeah.
Well, yeah, if you do like 4 starting flights or whatever.
Well, they would.
Okay.
The
yeah.
homecoming
If
mystery.
they did that,
Yeah.
they would do 4. They would probably do 4. Like,
Okay, so say
I
it
mean, look
gets,
at the Colossus. It's
right, but what's the Colossus prize pool? It's like $5 million, give or take.
yeah, maybe 5 or 6.
Okay, so
maybe.
let's say it gets a $5 million prize pool and you allocate a third of that to the bounties. So now you have something in the neighborhood of like 1.2 million to the bounties, but you have to pay, like you have to have 1,000 people, give or take, or closer to like 1,200 people eligible for bounties.
How's this different than the 1K?
Well, there's problems with the 1K as well.
which we saw.
Yeah, but
Big problems. The reason why this is worse is because, one, as I mentioned, the rake becomes more impactful at 20% or 19%, whatever it is. But two, it's now this thing where, like, as you start to regress to zero with the amount of money that is being charged up front / the prize pool or whatever, you start to notice the disparity more. We kind of gave the $1 million one a pass. I mean, maybe we didn't, like sharp people didn't, but like the general populace would give it a pass because 3 people became millionaires out of this massive field, right? But then the next bounty down,
that's the allure of the whole thing,
right? But then the next bounty down, I think, was 250K, and then the next bounty down from that was like 3 or 4 100K bounties.
I thought there was a $500,000. And then a couple $250,000.
Maybe, but
I think there was.
Okay, so maybe, so yeah, but
and a couple $250,000, maybe 2 or 3 quarter.
Point is that like 80% of the bounty prize pool was distributed amongst like 10 people.
Yeah, and they can fix that too. I mean, they can have one instead of making, like, they made 2 $1 million because they wanted to say 2 $1 million pools, right? They can and you know
they should fix that,
right? And if the community's like, we don't want that, then they can be like, okay, you know what? We're just going to keep it always just 1, and if we get all this influx of more entries, then we'll just spread it out more. You know, maybe add a few more $250,000.
I guess
should they fix it?
Yes, absolutely. I think, well, because you always, as an operator, want the money to be
spread out,
distributed amongst the field.
Yeah,
you don't ever want it pooling to just a couple of people,
right?
And
so better for the ecosystem,
So why'd they do it?
Because they think that
because it's better advertising.
Right. It's a marketing thing for sure.
It's the same reason why they guarantee X amount for first place in a bunch of events, right? They like to think that the Recs are very attracted to the idea of playing for a specific amount at first place or a specific big bounty, 2 big bounties.
I guess this is the problem that I have, is that there's this duality where they believe that the Recs are drawn to this massive lottery number, but also that the Recs need to have 1.5 or 2x min cash in order to continue to return to events. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to get at here, is like, if you do a very small stakes bounty like this, and you allocate big numbers up top,
the min cash
is like a quarter of a buy-in.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know if it's a quarter of a buy-in.
I mean, it's gonna be small.
It's probably your money back.
I know this because I min cashed. It was literally you get your money back.
You get your money back, and I'm pretty sure the Recs and the people that play these events already know that going into this. They understand that since so much money has to be allocated to the bounty, then they aren't going to get a 2x or a 1.5x return for a min cash. Because essentially, if you think about it, if it's a 1K and you get 1,000 back, you actually are 2xing because half of that, or whatever it is, 300 right, goes to that. So you are getting a 1.5x on your actual buy-in. Just the bounty.
But recreationals don't think that way. It's about...
Yeah, no, I think they do. I think I think you're giving them not giving them enough credit.
Okay, well, listen, I'm on board for that. But if they do think that way, then the notion that they need to earn X amount on their return for min cashing is ludicrous.
I just don't think people care that much. I think it's a fun event. It's just a one-off once a year. Like, I think if they ran a $400 mystery bounty, it would be a huge success. It would smash and everybody would love it. That's
but would the millionaire only get $780,000? Is a real question.
That is a real question. Well, GG is attached to WSOP now, so it's possible. I think that I agree with you that I think that they should be doing more throughout the prize pools. I just really struggle to dip below that 1K mark. Yeah, I don't really see a reason for it.
But I think they're leaning into it. They more and more. Every year there's like an extra event that is under 1K, and they're catering to, the masses for anybody to come out to Vegas and play.
How many events under $1,000 do you think will be on the schedule this year?
How many were on last year? I don't know.
I thought just the opener, but I could be wrong. Or the
Oh
opener
my
and the
God,
Colossus.
there's so
Much more
many,
than that.
so many more.
It was the
Much more
opener,
than
the
that.
There were
Colossus.
so many
There's-
$600
like
ones.
4 or
and-
5
yeah.
$600
It's-
deep
There was like
stacks.
10.
Yeah,
maybe
I
more.
honestly think it was 8 to 10 events.
Yeah.
They
Okay,
had-
so
they
there
had
was
a
the
bunch of
opener.
800s and 600s.
There was the opener, the Colossus, and then they do what, the 600 turbos like once a week or
They did
something
a
like that.
600 deep stack once a week. They,
They
do
have-
an 800
They do
deep stack.
$500 freeze out.
They have
500
the,
for-
the
Yeah.
$500 Salute to Warriors
Right,
charity
yeah.
event as well. Like
Gotta
they,
salute the Warriors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot
They have
of
a
them.
bunch of stuff these days.
And I bet there's just as many, if not more, this year.
I mean, it sounds like there's better likelihood to be more than less.
Right.
Mhm.
That's what I would think too.
Yeah.
And I mean, I
Yeah,
understand
maybe,
that.
and maybe
yeah.
this is my underlying point is that this is why I don't care. Like the dollar continues to go down in value, and so do the buy-in levels. That just doesn't coincide with me.
Right,
doesn't
and that's
make
why
any
you see
sense.
that's why you see the entries going up. I mean, obviously, so that's
But
what
we
they
see
want
the
to
entries
see.
go up across the board. They go up at the higher buy-ins too. So that doesn't really track either. Like the notion that somehow they wouldn't still just get 20,000 person
Well, of
flights for
course
a
they're going to
1K
go
Colossus.
up. No, but of course they're going to go up because you said the dollar's devalued. That's still part of it. So that they go up. They also go up in the higher ones because the higher ones are cost less than they would have 10 years ago.
Right. My point is then you don't need the small buy-in. You would just see an increase on 1Ks anyway. Right? You would see a larger 1K field regardless. It just doesn't track that we should continually get closer and closer and closer to $0 for the cost to play a WSOP event whenever the actual worth of a dollar continues to drop. Right? It should be the opposite direction. You should see 5Ks start to become 7,500.
Right. I mean, if that was the case, then the main event should be a 25K by now, but it's just not going to be.
Right, and
because
fine.
they
Like
want people to
I
play
don't
it.
think we care about a price point where the majority of regular people still feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, where does it stop? What if you have a $100 buy-in for a bracelet?
Yeah.
Like, is that okay?
I mean, I don't know, but I would probably say not. I mean, they basically sometimes do online. They have
But
like $200
so
ones?
this is the point I'm trying to make, right? Like it's easy for you to advocate for 500s because that's in your price point, and it's easy to see that 100s is obviously too diluted.
Yeah, but 500 is in most people that
There was, like,
play tournaments. price
13,
point.
14 events, by the way, like in that 3
Yeah,
digit
that's a
buy-in.
lot. That's a lot.
There are how
right?
many?
13.
13. Yeah.
Like between mixed game, between PLO, no limit.
Out,
like,
out of like 90, right? So like a sixth of the events are under 1K.
a good amount of them
yeah.
are just small buy-in tournaments, which is
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, you know, that requires a lot of resources on their part, so they jack up the rake and
Yeah. Well, also I think it's because this is kind of a new thing, right? Like you go back 10 years, there weren't anything under 1K, and now that they did it, they saw they were popular and they brought more people in. So then they're going to continue to make more. But I don't think I don't think their plan is to just keep dropping and keep dropping and keep dropping. Like I don't think
Why?
you're ever going to see a $100 tournament.
why? It's happened year over year. Well, do you think we'll see a $300 buy-in this year?
We had one.
Yes.
Okay.
We
do you
already
think-
had one.
Okay. So you
Right.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Year over year, it continues to get smaller. Why wouldn't we see a 250?
It doesn't continue to get smaller year
I
after
think
year.
I think the thing that we're missing here is that the average. I think if you track the average buy-in level of WSOP, what's happening is the bottom end is expanding in that we're getting more of these lower buy-in events, but we're also getting 100K, a 250K.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we're that far away from them trying to do another $1 million buy-in at WSOP, a 500K, something
Right.
like that, right?
Right, they are going the other way,
They're
too.
just like expanding in both directions, I think. And they're also adding more 25Ks, like a 50K PLO, shit like that, you know? So they're really branching.
once they decided to start implementing these tournaments that were less than 1,000, it wasn't like every year it just got less and less and less. It was just like we're gonna do like 300 to 1,000. And it's anywhere in between, and it's just been that way.
Wait, when did they run their first 300?
Like there was a 365
Few year-
event in
yeah,
like
a few years
2018.
ago, 5 years ago, maybe.
They did,
Giant.
they
6
did the
years
giant,
ago.
yeah, 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah,
Okay.
it's been a while.
Yeah, I don't think the expanding at the top matters because there's a big difference between the two. When you expand at the bottom, it requires the full facility to be occupied. When you expand at the top, it requires a corner in the room.
Literally, all the high stakes events are in Paris Purple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like taking
In
up
the
5
back right
tables
corner.
at
Yeah.
most, right?
So
But
do you think if schedule comes out tomorrow and it's all 1Ks, you think or higher? You think you think more people would be happy or upset?
I think
The general.
I think short
community.
term. I think short term, whatever the response was, wouldn't really matter. But I think long term, if we were to compare average field size of the 300 buy-in range compared to like the 1K buy-in range, I still think the 1Ks are doing better proportionally speaking.
I don't think so.
You think do you think there's greater than 3x the players in the 300?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, like if you look at like the Millie Maker versus the Colossus, or not the Millie Maker, the $1 Million Bounty or whatever, like compared to the Colossus.
Well, the $1 Million Bounty was
That's
a
a
special
special
event,
event.
and it was
Like, all
like
the 1Ks.
Why can't they all be special
Right,
events?
all the 1Ks have
like
a special
this podcast
title.
every day is a very special episode.
Exactly. Right,
Welcome
like
to a very special WSOP event.
That's what I mean, like-
Conrad hosting the WSOP. That's what we need.
that's easy to say, but like
Special.
you compare 1-to-1, right? You would compare the Giant to the $1 Million Bounty because they both have a name.
the Giant had like 30-some thousand people in it.
Okay,
Is that a
Did you-
good
Ridiculous
thing?
like that.
but you don't think the $1 Million
What, the
Bounty had
1Ks?
10K?
How many 1Ks get 10,000 people?
The Bounty, I'm sure.
The bounty did.
The
For
bounty
sure
code.
it did.
Yeah.
For sure it did.
It came close, probably. Yeah, I
But
don't know
that's
exact
the
number,
only
but
1K that gets 10,000 people.
Yeah, but that's the only
Right.
300 that gets 30,000. You see what I mean? Like, I think if you did like, I think if you,
You just did a comparison of one
yeah,
to
if
the other.
if you,
So maybe it is close. It
corrected
might
them.
be close to 1-to-1. I
right.
don't
So
know.
if it's close to 1-to-1, then that's why my argument, I think.
But now you just
is-
shut out 2/3 of the people to play these events.
But you're not.
Right?
That's the point.
Why?
What
Because
do you mean?
because that's all.
There's literally only 33% of the people that would be playing, as opposed to the smaller buy-ins.
There's 33% of the total entrants, but we don't know what the uniques are. The overlap there, if we did a Venn diagram of the two, the overlap is very vast. Like it's not like, you know, there's only a sliver of people that play 300s and 1Ks.
Regardless, you're shutting out a lot more people, and I don't think that's a good thing for poker.
There's a lot of people that don't play 1Ks.
Yeah,
And that
there's a
play
lot of people that
300s.
come out. They come
Okay.
out. They're excited to play their 1 or 2 events.
The
that are
homecoming
under,
was what?
Right, that are under
600?
500.
500.
I think that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like use all the resources at the start and then like don't run like a
Yeah, it's
small,
one event.
like a small tournament thing again. Like running 200-300s doesn't really make much.
I think you guys forget like how much of a negative experience these events
Can
push
be.
on to everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, they suck for a lot of people. They suck for us that are going to play at more of the events, and that they don't suck for the person that's only going to play 1 or 2 events.
I totally agree with you. I also think that there's something to be said about like, you know, quote unquote earning your way into the arena. You know what I mean? Like if you're still going to get 10,000 runners for a 1K, do we need 35,000 people for a 300?
I mean,
or can you just like, you know, save up or work your way into a 1K or satellite or, you know, I don't
So
think
that-
creating
that's
some
also-
barrier of entry
also
to
that,
WSOP
that
is
$300
bad.
event that they ran was like, I'm pretty sure it was like spread out over like the whole summer.
Yeah,
like
I thought that
events were spread out over
I
the
thought
whole
that was
summer,
good.
and it was like at
At
a lot of,
night.
flights were at night, like after 7 p.m. and it was a super turbo.
Yeah,
in the
I thought that
beginning.
was good.
So yeah,
I thought that was a good
right.
idea, but that's not what they're doing now.
I think they
Yeah.
should do a lot more of running additional like turbo flights at night or super turbo
Agreed.
flights for stuff, because it's a really great way to boost the fields for some of the events that maybe wouldn't get as much otherwise, and maybe only have one starting day or something. You can just add like a evening flight with a fast structure that people can play, and it's like they're done by like 1 or 2 a.m. and then
Yeah.
you can like bag for day 2. And
That would have
maybe
to be
day
the
2
only
happens, like-
option though, because if they still had an option to play like a normal one during the day, then everyone would play that, and it would.
Not
defeat the
necessarily. I think there would be plenty of people who like.
You guys like Conrad firing at night every night.
Yeah, I mean, like
I know,
when
but
they,
I'm saying that also fire during the day.
Yeah, I
Right, but
I
this-
agree
yeah.
with both of you.
Yeah, I think that you would certainly get a lot of overlap. Like the NAPT did this basically. Like the NAPT, they had the $1,600 like daytime flight with a normal kind of a structure, and then a lot of the people who busted that day would fire the evening flight. But even if that evening flight is pretty reg heavy, it still is adding a bunch to the prize pool. Like it's
Right.
boosting these prize pools, and it's doing it at a time when it's not very resource intensive for them to manage, like having additional players. So I think for these events where there's a lot of regs, there's a lot of WSOP events where regs like me are basically just going to fire as many bullets as they need to fire in order to get into day 2. If you're going to do that, you may as well add a bunch more flights, boost the prize pools, make it more attractive for the Rex. You know?
I think the bigger conversation though that is getting overlooked again is like how resource intensive the early flights are. Like I can't be the only one who remembers how miserable of an experience it is to start at 10 a.m. and bag at 3 a.m.
Oh, that's
Right.
terrible.
But that's a byproduct of running these low buy-in large fields. They have to do that. You
That-
have
It's
to
not
log
great.
the hours.
It's not great, but it also gives other people opportunity, I think.
I don't think it's worth the opportunity.
I definitely heard. I mean, I've had experiences where players who were obviously rec players were complaining a lot about that specifically.
Right.
Yeah,
They-
I think they could just tweak the structure so they don't have that doesn't
Well, they have to.
happen.
What-
Take out some levels.
What would
right?
you suggest? Right
I would
now
take-
it's
I would-
30-minute
just-
turbos.
Yeah, of course, right.
less levels.
Yeah, but they're already 30 minutes. I mean, like,
But that's what I'm saying. So how do you get 3 more hours eliminated from the event?
Yeah, but these
personally-
weren't all going to 3 a.m. I don't know why you pulled that number up.
Because
like,
the
that was-
homecoming, I played
right.
till 2:45, busted
that
and
was
didn't bag.
yeah, that was a few years ago, and they changed the structure since then. So
what
like
was the structure last year for the
Right.
opening event?
Like you would get out of there at like midnight.
For
Yeah.
For the gladiator.
the gladiator?
Yeah, you would be out of there. Yeah, you'd bag at like midnight.
Oh, no, I am back.
I feel like that's. I don't know.
I got in line to play that, and I didn't have my ID, so then I didn't play it.
Yeah, I mean maybe that's true. I'm
One,
not
one
sure.
thing I would like to see them do, or one thing I would like to see at least some tournament series do, is speeding up the levels in the first half of day one. Basically, just not having day one as a whole be faster, but just that first 2 hours, first 4 hours of play. Like, it's okay to do a pretty turbo-y kind of structure.
Right,
at
you don't
that
have to
point.
start with 300 big blinds.
Yeah,
You start
like,
with 100 big blinds.
And I get the idea that Recs want to have like playing time. They want to. That you don't want them to be buying in for like 100 bigs and potentially busting really quickly. But it's also like you don't need to have 6 hours of 150 plus big blinds deep play at the beginning of a tournament, because a lot of people just are not going to show up for that.
Well, I don't think the World Series has this problem.
No, I just mean like, I mean, I was exaggerating, but like you can speed it up. If it's a choice between speeding up the first few levels and finishing at 2 a.m., speed up the first few levels. Like you absolutely don't need to finish at 2 a.m.
Totally agree with you, but that's from our perspective.
Or just eliminate the first.
Or just eliminate the events. Like that's kind of what I'm saying.
Well, the thing is, here's the thing: we can't.
The Doomsayer.
We
No,
obviously
it's not
can't.
that.
We obviously can't have it all, right? We can't have it all. We can't have everybody inclusive, and then like not play late, and then we can't like do all these things. So like it's
Right.
never going to be perfect,
Right,
right?
here's my
so that's
point.
why they try to just give a little bit for everybody.
Well, they don't though. These events are. We can all agree these events are targeting recreationals. They're targeting the lowest buy-in crowd, et cetera, et cetera. So what do they want out of this? They want turnover, but they want to offer them a pleasant experience, right? So it's slow in the beginning and then fast thereafter. It's if you come on time, you will be offered a structure that would allow you to last a few hours, have a good time, have a pleasurable experience, and then get your ass out of there, right? But from that point forward, now you have incredibly long lines. You have a very long day ahead of you. They have a difficulty with breaks. These breaks are extending, like color breaks are extending for 45 plus minutes.
I played a lot of these small buy-in events. I never stood in line very often. Not that often.
Did you re-enter?
Yes.
I think something that might be getting lost here a little bit is, Burke, you might not have experienced how much better it is at Horseshoe in Paris than what it was at the Rio.
Right, way better.
Oh, no,
yeah.
I played the homecoming at
played.
Paris. I played 4 flights of it.
Okay, but I mean,
Housewarming.
that was
He was in
that was
Paris.
that was literally the
event.
first event they ever hosted,
And it was
there.
horrible.
Yeah, and I think that you might not have seen some of the stuff that went last year, where they actually did make some pretty good improvements in how smooth it was.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's all I'm saying.
Having load your Bravo up and just print your ticket
They've
out.
been a
and,
lot
like,
more
yeah.
efficient.
That's
with
always
that
been
That's
the case,
always
right?
existed. People
Yeah.
don't do that.
But
shit.
I think it's become more popular now.
They
and
have
it's-
been a lot more. They've
they
been a
all
lot,
work
a lot
now
better at
before- yeah.
encouraging people to do that.
Right,
I'm
exactly.
seeing rec players doing that I never saw before. It
Right,
used to be
and that
only
just helped
pros who
eliminate
did
How
that.
did that
lines and-
alleviate the lines, though, getting people reset? Because that's the only line I'm talking about.
You mean getting people
When you're in
the
line-
late reg
Nah,
line?
dude,
Yeah.
the line is fucking terrible.
Yeah, like,
regardless of what they say, the line is terrible. I was literally in the
I've seen
300.
lines go all the way out to the actual casino.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still problems. I'm just saying.
No,
that, like,
no, yeah.
you're-
That's not my point.
A lot of what you're you're saying might just be based on like that one event at the very, very beginning of Paris.
What I'm saying is late reg lines. I'm basically talking about resource intensive things, right? So there just aren't going to be a lot. If the structure starts off relatively slow, which it always will, because you understand that the WSOP was the absolute last tour in America to implement the big blind ante and to get rid of no ante poker. They had the first 2 levels, no ante poker, years after not another tour on Earth played no ante poker. And it was based off of the recreationals want to play no ante poker bullshit, right? So they're incredibly slow to adopt to what is best for the overall structure of the event.
Yeah.
In lieu of what they believe is making amateurs happy. And when I'm framing this conversation of like, do we actually need these small buy-ins? Like somebody in the chat posted, why can't Berkey just admit that smaller buy-ins help the poker community? Can't all be high stakes. Okay, fine. I agree with you to a point. But at what point, or let me rephrase the question. How are small buy-ins helping the community whenever they're facing 18 to 21% rake, whenever they are creating a negative experience where people are standing in line to be sat for hours, whenever they are clogging up the resources to run other events?
Yeah, I think you're just highlighting the bad portions of the experience and not highlighting the good portions of the experience.
I do think that one thing that you point out that is really important to this whole thing is that I don't think a lot of the low stakes players and a lot of recs understand how hard they're getting fleeced by 18 to 20% rake.
Right.
That is true. Right.
Nor do they care.
Think that,
So that's why I'm asking. Right. So they're none the wiser. Fine, but I am wiser. So what I'm asking then is, how do rake traps help the community? Because the argument against what I'm saying is that
people show up because they don't care, because they can. This is the buy-in that
Is
they
it
can
really
afford.
a trap?
But how is that helpful?
Because they show up.
Okay, I understand what I hear you.
Yeah, maybe it's offset by how many people now get interested in poker, because like, look how many more people come out to play these events than have in the past.
If the house breaks them, how does that help the community? It's like GG having a really high rake structure, right? How does that
More
help?
rake is better, Burke.
How does that help the ecosystem? Whenever like Patrick Howard puts out a tweet yesterday that demonstrates nobody is beating GG's rake
The admin
from
fee.
like 100 NL up without rake back. How does that help the ecosystem? Right? Like, they have the most games on all of
how
online
keep
poker.
increasing the barrier entry? How does that help the ecosystem?
It's not. I never argued to increase it.
But it would increase it if you
It's
increase
been
the
1K.
buy-ins.
It's been 1K forever.
Here's another aspect of this, right? That
And
when
inflation,
You bring
money's
up
cheaper.
you bring up Patrick Howard's point. It's a really good thing to bring up, because the level of rake is going to affect who wins and who loses. There are going to be players who, when they're getting raked at 18%, are not winning, but who, if they were getting raked at 12% or 10%,
Correct.
are winning, right? So the barrier to entry that Brian's talking about, on some level, yeah, it is the absolute number of what the buy-in is. But on another level, on a long-term level, it's at what buy-in level can certain players actually win and sustain themselves within the economy, right?
No,
So
that's true, right.
part of the reason why the low buy-in levels are unsustainable for some players is, like you say, Burke, the house fleeces them with this high rake. They go broke because they can't win because the rake is so high.
Right.
And they would be possibly winning if they were able to play with lower rake. So the issue here, I think, a lot of the time is going to be, how do we keep the rake level at the low stakes at a level where the house is incentivized to run these events because they're making a good amount of money from them, but the rake is low enough that the greatest percentage of the player pool is at least breaking even or only marginally losing, so that certain players don't just go broke in these events really quickly because they can't overcome the rake.
And that's in a nutshell my argument. At the 1K level, we see a rake somewhere between 11 and 13%, which is going to by and large be beatable. And this is a simple byproduct of it requires less resources. At the 300 level, you require so many extra resources in dealers, in staffing, in all of the tables being utilized and everything else, that they have no choice but to raise the rake.
Yeah.
Right.
So you'd like to see a higher buy-in, less people at the World Series?
I don't think that's
that's
No.
right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think
I feel like it's bad phrasing.
It doesn't help to grow, though.
Well,
I also don't
but
think
that's what would happen.
I don't
right?
think- I don't think
There'll
the
be
foot
way
trap-
less people at the event.
I think if we were to measure foot traffic, it would be 1-to-1. I don't think the foot traffic at the World Series has significantly increased, like by magnitudes.
Wow, I do.
You think that it went from like 25,000 uniques to like 100,000 because they have $300
I don't know the exact
buy-ins?
numbers, but I know it's definitely increased over the last few years, for sure.
I would definitely say that I'm with Tortoise. I would definitely say that there's a lot
I think
of
it's
people
gone up.
coming
Way
in.
more.
I'm not saying that it hasn't gone up. I'm saying that it hasn't gone up as a byproduct of the smallest buy-ins. Like the people that were coming here to play $400 deep stacks at the Venetian either were or were not playing WSOP events.
WSOP still has like deep stacks every day, right? Like,
They have.
it's like a couple $100 to play.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's $225.
It gets canceled a lot because they can't find the space. But yeah, they have
like,
a deep stack. They have a nightly daily.
What if they just
nightly,
had
whatever.
the higher buy-in tournaments, but also ran the lower stakes dailies?
I think my frustration here is the wording that we're somehow referring to 1K as a higher buy-in.
Right.
Right. Like this is by all accounts in MTT land
It's
is
low stakes live
stakes.
tournaments.
Yeah. It's like there shouldn't be a 150 fucking bracelet event. Like, and the thing is, I think we can all acknowledge that. So why is the line of demarcation at 365?
And there's like, I don't even know if they are even running $300. Like, I mean, maybe it's like $400 or $500, whatever is the minimum.
I think that there's a good chance we'll see their lowest buy-in this year.
Their lowest ever?
Ever.
So you're saying to be
I mean,
under
last
300?
year was a 300. So you think there's gonna be like a 250?
I think that there's a really, really strong chance we will see the smallest buy-in we've ever seen at the World Series.
Like a
this year.
250 with X% rake, but nobody really cares because they want the experience of playing a bracelet event.
I would bet it's $365 right.
I would bet that it's lower.
I would also take the lower.
Under. Sorry, lower. No, lower's right.
And it's slightly off topic. I have a theory, Buck. I have a theory about your excitement level on this podcast.
Okay.
I think it correlates to the hat that you're wearing.
Okay.
When you're wearing that beanie hat, you're like
Pissed.
Yeah, you're mad or you're like less hyped about stuff.
Yep.
If we come in and you're wearing the backwards baseball cap, you're always
ready to go.
excited. You're like ready to go. You're ready to go out and play.
Yeah.
Like
This is emo Berkey right here. That's right.
There's a distinct difference.
It's not about the beanie.
If I show up to do this podcast and you're wearing that hat, I'm like,
Like,
oh, he's going to be arguing with everything today. Like,
No. It's not that. It's like, look, I'm not trying to disqualify any of your opinions. I think that you guys are very right in what you're saying, and I think you're making very good points with regard to not only why these events exist, but why they potentially could be a benefactor to the community at large. My counter is just that I think it's only a benefactor to the WSOP brand. And I also think that there's a chance long term that it's detrimental. And look, I am playing a little bit of devil's advocate. The truth is, at the end of the day, I don't fucking care. It's not my brand. Like, I don't care what the World Series does. If they want to light their fucking doors on fire, let them. If they want to run a million-person $1 buy-in and have the biggest field of all time,
that'd be so awesome.
like, let them. I don't care.
I'm in.
But I'm gonna have an opinion.
billion people.
I could
and you're
fire
in.
like 10 bullets into that thing.
Right, but it's like,
Now you're only doing it because it's good value to you.
but I'm gonna have an opinion on it, right? Because I think that there is some part of the community that recognizes what these things do, bigger picture, and I think bigger picture still is going to matter. I understand where Brian's coming from because it's like he can play a full WSOP schedule now, where there's no way that would have been the case if it's 1Ks and above, right? Like his full schedule might be 5 events if it's 1Ks and above, whereas like last year, I don't know, would you have 15 on the schedule, 18?
I mean, like over 20.
Over
probably.
20,
Well,
right?
like with the re-entries, yeah.
Right.
for
So his
sure,
average
20.
buy-in was probably like $750, and he played like 20, 25. I get it. Like that's the dream of everybody. But like from my perspective, it's like, well, and you know, this sounds a little, I had to walk uphill both ways to school type of fist waving, but it's like, you know, when we were coming up, you had to earn your way to the World Series. Like I didn't play the World Series my first 3 years as a professional. I was grinding, and I would go there and I would play sit and goes and try to like find my way into an event here or there. Or I would play satellites online and get my way into the main, whatever. And that's just okay. That's a healthy ecosystem, is to have your biggest, most premier tour that exists in the entire community a little bit out of reach for some aspects of it.
And WSOP has grown year over year from what we've seen recently.
I think all tours have.
So like
Right.
the main event gets bigger too.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, oh man, like the small buy-ins are gonna help
Exactly.
the tournament grow.
I think that's a really good point to bring up, right? Is that the main event hit a record number last year. That's not a small buy-in. So that almost is certain to demonstrate.
They went all out on satellites across the world.
Sure.
Actually.
GTO.
So like,
Would we rather that they put $365 satellites to the main than a $365 bracelet event?
I mean, they do both, so
Sure.
yeah.
Here's a suggestion. What if they were to take all the buy-ins under 1K and give that segment of the buy-in range its own branding, make them ring events instead of bracelet events, and make them a big part of the schedule, but then say bracelet events are only going to be 1K and up.
I would be okay with that if they started it 3 weeks earlier.
And
They
like
started
got
to
the ring
start the
events out of the
series.
way-
My
out
big
of the
thing
way
it has
first.
nothing to do with the bracelet. It has nothing to do with diluting the brand. It has everything to do with taking up too many resources.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a negative experience for the majority of people that aren't playing small stakes.
I think if we look at it through the lens of we want WSOP to do whatever allows them to run lower rake events, like whatever doesn't force them to be charging 18 to 20% rake, I think that's a really solid argument of why it's bad for the community that, that we have these situations, because if it's putting them in a position where they have to charge super high rake in order to make it viable, you now are creating inherently you're creating a situation where those events are very difficult for anybody. Well, not anybody, but like it's hard to be winning in those events for Rex. And creating events where Rex can win is really good because it makes them sustainable, and it means that they are much more likely to continue, potentially progressing up through the buy-ins and playing more events at higher levels and things like that. I don't think you necessarily want these high rake events where a lot of the players are getting crushed by the pros, but a lot of the players are just getting crushed by the house as well.
Right.
The housewarming was rake free.
The what, sorry?
I said the housewarming was rake
That's
free.
great. I mean, do more of that,
right,
do more of that.
That would be great
Wait,
if they did.
how was it rake free?
Your first entry was rake free.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Wow, I had no idea.
I remember that now. I
How
remember
big
that
was
now.
the rake on a re-entry?
50%. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, honestly,
it was a
like-
normal whatever
So
they
like
do for
18
like
to 21 or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but I just know that the first entry was rake free.
I think your
I
main
think that's really great.
your
'cause they
main
probably
point
had-
And they
here-
should do that like every year, maybe. Yeah.
your main point here is that if they can get away with the $300 tournament, what's stopping them from having a $100 tournament
Exactly.
where they rake
$50 tournament.
X amount, and now it's like, oh, people just
100
want a
plus
chance to win a
50.
bracelet,
Yeah.
and now it's like, well, This
100
is a
plus
lot of
50 and they guarantee
resources.
first place to be like $500,000.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Right, people will show
I
up.
think there is a line. There has to be a line. They're not going to run a $1 tournament, right? So like there has to be a line somewhere.
Don't be so sure, buddy.
I'm telling you. Okay, I will. You want to bet in the next 15 years they don't run a $1 bracelet event?
Book it.
Lay me a price, and I will take that bet.
All right, I don't know, 5-1.
You think it's 20% that they'll do it? Give me 10 to 1, and you got to bet.
10-1.
10 to
in the
1.
next 15
$1
years.
Yeah.
flip and go.
All right, you got it.
Okay, what are we betting?
I don't care.
All right.
Damn.
my
Wait, hold on.
my-
This can't be online,
my
right?
100 to your 1,000.
No,
Hey,
not online.
Why?
Right?
Why
is
couldn't
a
they
live-
just run a day one online?
Because we're talking about live events where it's
It'll be a live
He
event.
tried to scum you.
I'm talking about live events.
I think that, listen, if GG takes over WSOP, I think you will absolutely see a day one $1 event. Where day two is like,
I don't
it's going to be like a
disagree.
quantum. You can buy into day two for, you know.
But you probably don't have an issue with that because it doesn't.
I don't.
Right.
Because
I
it's
think
online.
that's, I think,
That's
that,
what we're
I think
talking
this is what
about
they
here.
should do with the 365s.
Right.
Like if you want to run a $300 event, run day one online,
Yeah.
and then either make it a quantum.
I'm all for that too. I think that's fine. Yeah.
Make it either a quantum structure where you can just buy in day two for 40 bigs and it costs you 10x, or don't.
Yeah.
And just have people play into day two where it becomes live, and now you have 15% of the field.
Or have
there.
an option, right? Have an option to play both, maybe.
Is your only issue with this the amount of resources
Yes.
it takes for the events that they're
Yes.
trying to run?
Yeah.
And those resources could better be used elsewhere?
Yeah. I think if you're going to crowd 5,000 people into the space, it should be spread out over a myriad of events so that there isn't an issue with like seating and waiting and stuff, right? Because if it's one single event, then that means that as everybody busts, all those people are getting right back in the reentry line.
For
And the
what
line
it's
is
worth,
just infinite.
I played a decent amount of events last year, and I feel like the longest I ever waited was like 25, maybe 30 minutes on
Nah.
the entry.
No.
I waited
There was
an
one-
hour and a half, and then I
there
didn't
was
have my
one-
ID and just went back to that.
There
went
was
back to the
one event, I don't remember which one it
Literally.
was, where I was like, I waited a long time.
300. The Gladiator was the event.
I might not even
No.
play that.
Way too long.
I just remember there being a line that literally went into the Horseshoe Casino.
I remember showing up for an event last year, and getting my ticket from the machine after paying on Bravo, then seeing that after getting my ticket, it was going to be at least 2 hours until I was able to get a seat. So I unregged and went to the win instead. Like, I remember that happening. So there was definitely some stuff where it was like, you have your ticket, you're registered for the event, but we can't seat you for hours from this point.
And I don't think it's like every smaller buy-in event was like that. Especially
But there was
not,
times,
especially not the rant, like the special ones that have like the guarantee on it, or like, but like the $500 freeze out, or well, obviously it's freeze out, so it's not going to have that. But like, you know, the $600 deep stacks that they have, there was no issue.
I would be
with
totally
that.
into that for what it's worth. If you want to make every buy-in under 1K of freeze out, I'm sold. I'm fucking in.
Yeah.
As in, like,
Totally
just
sold.
one buy and freeze out. If you're done, goodbye. Like,
Yes.
that's it.
Yeah, because that would definitely free up
On your
resources
bike.
for sure.
And you know what will happen? You'll change your tune about that buy-in level. Because those prize pools are going to go down drastically.
Of course they will.
That
Right,
doesn't
but-
do anything good.
Well, that's ultimately my point. If we,
I like freeze outs though, you know.
if we look at like a small buy-in freeze out
Up on time.
and we see that the numbers drastically get obliterated, then we recognize that it's not a 1-to-1 comparison to its 1K counterpart. Right? Because a 1K freeze out will do numbers. It'll do 3,000 people.
No, I think
Oh, no,
I
don't
think,
get me
I think
wrong.
if you run if you run a 1K freeze out compared to like a non-freeze out, it's going to be the same thing as a
that's not what I'm comparing. I'm comparing 1-to-1.
Right.
If you run a 1K freeze out, it's going to do numbers. It's going to get 3,000, 3,500 people.
And if you do a
You run a
$300
$300 freeze out,
out,
it's not going to get 12,000 people.
I don't know about that.
I would say it's going to get at least 6 or 7.
Okay, well, do the math.
Crunch
More
numbers.
people were showing up to the 1K then.
What about a $500? So it's 2 to 1.
Fine. Listen,
I'm just saying.
I
that,
would like to experiment that route. Like,
Right.
let's take all the small buy-ins and make them freeze out.
No, because it's a big difference between having to try to get, like, I think like a lot of people that play the 300 will also play a 500, but maybe a lot of people that play that won't play the 1K, right? So it's like, you know, it's comparing one getting one getting 10,000 compared to one getting
The
3,300
real
as
question
compared
is,
to 5,000.
does this actually grow poker?
I personally don't think so at
I
all.
don't think so. I think people will show up and play one day event and like they'll have a good time and stuff, but does it grow the ecosystem? I don't think so.
That's kind of good, Matt. So
I feel like this is another area where it's like we feel like we have an instinct for it, what grows poker and what helps, but we don't
know.
ultimately know.
Yeah.
Like I would hope that the people who are doing this stuff, like the people who are managing WSOP and deciding the schedule, things like that, I would hope they have data to show this is what grows poker, this is what doesn't, right? This is what's good for the ecosystem, this is what's not. But I mean, I know, Buck, you talked to Jack Effel a fair amount, or have in the past, but we don't have that info, we don't have that data, and it's hard for us when we're flying in the dark.
to be fair, their data is going to be very anecdotal. It's the World Series has only been in existence for what, 40 some years?
Over 50.
Well, I just mean
50 years,
like
right?
year on year, like we don't have the hard info about how much their traffic increases. Like,
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that like for people who are like analyzing data, like just inflation could grow poker by that metric.
Oh yeah, I mean,
You know what I mean?
I guess I just basically the way I look at it is I feel like with WPT, I have enough confidence in the people that run WPT to think that they're smart enough to really understand how to know what is growing and what's not growing poker.
Yeah.
With WSOP, I don't have that confidence because I don't necessarily feel like I fully trust that they're making decisions in a way that's informed as opposed to just vibes, you know, like whatever.
Totally agree with you. And I think that's why we're saying our instincts matter a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's a lazy argument to always just gravitate towards lowering the monetary barrier of entry is what will grow the game. If the game suddenly became free, I don't necessarily think like if somehow it became free with the availability to win prizes, you know, maybe like a Candy Crush type of thing or something like that.
The stigma kind of changes, but that's it.
Stigma would change, and I think it would become more. I think you're right. It would become more.
The underworld goes away because now it's above board.
The society of it all would.
It's like,
would
like
be
now you're
more
not risking
accepting.
money. You can just win free prizes or whatever.
Right, but if out of all of that, the operator was still like taking a cut somehow, or maybe the barrier entry is not free but low, a couple dollars here and there, I don't necessarily
A
think that we
monthly
see.
subscription.
Well, WPT runs that model, right? That's
That's the Club WPT.
Club WPT, yeah.
And Club GG as well have the same thing, I think, right?
No, Club GG is an app.
Ah, okay.
It's just same as Poker Bros.
Club WPT is where you like pay monthly and you get like
Pay
free,
like 15
free
bucks a
rolls.
month.
Oh,
quote
wow.
unquote.
I completely didn't know what Club GG was then. Never mind.
Yeah, Club GG is very fascinating to me. I would love to know more because I don't understand how it's affiliated to GG.
Yeah,
It's like their app, right?
Yeah, but it's like fascinating because there's millions of dollars being risked on Club GG
so many
every
things
day.
that GG does that I don't understand and I don't know
Right, it's
anything
like
about.
it's strange
They're
to me.
everywhere.
Well, it's strange to me because they're making a push to be regulated. But imagine if like WSOP just launched, like they have a play app I think that was bought by Playtica, whatever it is, like WSOP app or something.
Yeah,
like
Wait,
that.
isn't Landon a fucking
Yeah.
sponsor for it?
What was the
For
name
Play
of it?
WSOP?
Play WSOP, right? Now imagine that they
Formerly, not anymore.
okay, but now imagine that Play
They showered
WSOP. Imagine Play WSOP, and granted, I don't think WSOP owns it anymore. I think they just licensed their name. But either way, imagine that just started offering app games where real money was being wagered at like a grandiose scale. There's just no way in a regulated market that would fly, right?
Yeah, it would get shut down so quick.
You would think they would almost have to. Like you would think that they would be risking their license in some capacity. So it's very weird to me that GG has this offshoot of an app where it's just basically out there in the black market, similar to the way that Poker Bros and PPP Poker and all these other apps are out there. Millions is being wagered every day. I'm in a club where we're playing 100, 200 with a $400 ante. So it's like just this single table is having hundreds of thousands of dollars exchange hands every day that it runs.
Wild.
Right? And that's one fucking table. One table. Forget about all the influencers that are running app games on there and just like, raking people capped at $7 per hand and, just raking them all over the court. There are dozens, hundreds maybe of those that exist, all on Club GG. Like, weird.
Wow.
Very weird to me. It's all very weird.
Whatever we think we know about the poker economy, you have to add that element and think like there's a lot of shit that even people who are pretty entrenched in the game like we are, there's a lot of shit that we don't know about. There's a lot of numbers we don't have. There's a lot of details we don't have,
All I know is if the WSOP schedule comes out tomorrow, there's a $100 tournament in there. I'm gonna be so pissed.
Yeah.
I want more
actually
heads up
be
events.
pissed.
Like they have the 25K heads up. You can just run like a 1K heads up, like a smaller one.
So getting back to the original
that'd be
conversation,
sick.
I do agree with what Brian's saying. I wish that they had mirror schedules, right? Like,
You have a high roller, you have a small roller, like
yeah,
low roller.
right.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
low roller.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of
Like,
it's
when
kind
the
of
low
And then you have the
right?
slow roller. If you slow roll someone on river, you get double the chips, but you
Yeah.
might get beat up in the parking lot.
Oh, man, I have a funny slow roll story. When I was in the Bahamas, I played at the same table as Sean Deeb. He slow rolled a European pro who he had never met before. He slow rolled him for no reason.
That's
Just
just his
'cause he's
thing.
Sean
That's-
Deeb,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, right? Then I played with this same guy again last summer. Johan Schumacher, I think was his name. And I talked to him about it, and I was like, oh, do you remember that time we were playing in the Bahamas and Sean Deeb slow rolled you? And he didn't know it was Sean Deeb. He didn't recognize Sean Deeb and thought he just got slow rolled by a random fish for no reason.
random white American.
Yeah, like he spent a year and a half thinking this random fish slow rolled
That's
him
so good.
That's
for
amazing.
absolutely no reason.
Yep.
And then it turns out it was Sean Deeb, and it's like his whole thing. And he was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I didn't know that was Sean Deeb." I thought it was so funny. He spent 18 months thinking he got slow rolled for no reason at all.
That's so good.
I mean, he did get slow rolled
yeah,
for
yeah,
no reason
of
at
course,
all,
of
other
course.
than that it was Sean's
Right.
thing. That was really funny.
There's one thing I'd like to see WSOP bring back.
Go ahead.
I can't remember if it was the first or second year where they started integrating online, but the final table used to be live.
They only did that once or
Yeah.
twice, maybe.
They did it last year. They had an event with Rampage final tabled it.
Oh yeah. It was the 5K.
yeah,
Fuck, I bubbled that one.
Oh really?
What was it?
Yeah.
I got like 11th.
Yeah, no,
in
they're
it.
doing that more now. They're doing events where everything plays out online until the final table, and you play it live.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool.
I think
Yeah.
Solver won it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good because it stops a bunch of ghosting, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're going to play that event and someone else is going to play on your account, I
It
mean,
stops it when it's the most important because they're in person.
yeah.
Well, that matters.
Well, of course. I just
it
mean-
slightly neutralizes
It definitely, yeah,
you know?
yeah. If you're gonna buy some random asshole's account and then he's gonna make the final table, God bless.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're punting just as much as you are cheating.
Right.
We see that more and more in like different tours. Even like Borgata had adopted this hybrid type thing where they
I think that places like, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think places like BetMGM and is who's the other? Oh, Stars, who I think is affiliated with Resorts. I think like they're crazy not to do this. Like just run a series where you do all the day ones online, or you have the option to play online at least, right? Because you just bolster your prize pool whenever you're trying to compete against bigger tours that are kind of stifling you.
Yeah, they did a 1K, 100K. They did. I think they did it like the wrong timing.
Yeah.
But I definitely see where it could be good.
Yeah. I do want to put a button on this really quickly because I think this is a big misconception and maybe why I'm being seen as so antagonistic here. Shout out to the Real Goat Cheese, comments on literally every video, so I know he watches every day. Appreciate that. But he said, Berkey wants the losing players to be fleeced. Rake is only relevant to the winners who naturally want the buy-in as high as possible to reduce the rake to affect their bottom line. And then he goes on to say, you want Rex to never leave the ecosystem, i.e. going broke. We're saying the same thing, man. Rake impacts everybody. Like, the winners aren't the only ones who win events. The winners aren't the only ones who cash in events. When you cash, you're raked. You're taking the lion's share of the rake, right? So you shouldn't think of it that way. When you buy in, everybody's paying the rake proportionally. It's not like because I have a 30% ROI, I'm paying significantly more rake.
Yeah.
Well, no, he's implying I'm paying more rake.
Because you win?
Because I'm winning. And that the losers are paying less rake, and that's just not the way that it works.
Everyone just pays the same.
Yeah.
I think he's thinking like, well, like if it's a $400 event and you bust, you just lose $400 regardless of what the rake is.
Right. But whenever you cash or you win,
right,
you're taking the worst of it because the prize pool's being decimated.
Right. You're cashing for less because the rake is more.
Yeah, and that's really
everybody
critical.
loses with higher rate.
Exactly.
And everybody cashes tournaments at some rate.
Yes, for sure. Obviously, even losing players have a cash rate. They just don't have an ROI.
Nobody's negative 100% in a tournament.
Right. You would have to like leave.
If they are, I want to play with them.
I've played 1,500 tournaments and I haven't cashed one yet.
Yeah. And even still, you probably wouldn't be. Anyway, the whole point is like, I'm actually advocating for the same thing you are. I agree. You don't want the recreationals to leave the ecosystem. You want to keep them as healthy as possible. You want to give them the most opportunity possible to see some return the times that they do get lucky. So what you don't want is what happened in the millionaire bounty last year where 3 people got incredibly wealthy and 9,000 people got obliterated by the rake.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just not really ideal.
And it kind of, I guess it kind of compounds too the further they go into the tournament, right? So like it would be like, you know, if you are a recreational player and you finally do make the final table and you make this cash, now you're getting significantly less than you would have if because the rake was lower.
All tournaments have a payout structure, and no matter where you finish from min cash to winner, a certain percentage of the prize pool is being afforded to you. That percentage is only representative of whatever the prize pool is. So if a lot of money was taken out of the prize pool via rake, you're just simply making less money at every single spot.
Yeah.
So the rake absolutely matters a ton, and I know that nobody gives a shit.
I want to make it clear, like I do give a shit about the rake, and I do care, and I want it to be lower.
No, I understand. I wasn't trying to like use this as leverage against your argument.
I know. Just letting everybody.
Okay, I guess we'll have this conversation again.
Yeah,
once the schedule comes out.
Next time we have this conversation, put the other hat on, and we'll see if you feel differently. Put on your nice guy hat.
That's right.
You know?
I mean, like. All right, look, you're not wrong
about the hats.
Well, you might be wrong. You might be wrong about the hats.
Definitely wrong about that.
But
you're not emo Berkey right here.
You're not wrong that I'm taking a negative slant to this. But the thing is that like if I don't, who will?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not even talking about your argument. I'm talking about your general mood and demeanor.
Oh no, I'm actually in a great mood today. Although I do have like a terrible head cold that's been bothering
why.
me.
Okay, that's why you got that. That's why you got the winter look on.
For sure.
Okay.
I woke up and I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was swallowing razor blades. Somehow,
shit. Okay, that's why.
It's weird because it's just it's like some sort of sinus infection, obviously. Because like I woke up and I thought I was dying, of course, and then I like had some water and moved around. And then suddenly it's only just like, my throat doesn't hurt anymore. Like there's no issues with anything. It's just literally like, I feel like I'm just smelling snot everywhere.
Yeah. I hate those days where you're not really sick, but like the first hour after you wake up and the last hour before you go to bed,
exactly.
when you're tired, it's like, it gets worse. I hate that.
It feels like a piano's on your chest.
Yeah.
You're just like, I didn't sign up for this. I drink bone broth every day. I'm supposed to be immune. Why are we going with...
What is
over the top reference?
Oh, okay.
When he flips his cap is when he turns it on.
Oh, okay. That is subtle, Guapo.
That is great.
A lot of respect
That is
for
great.
for
We gotta
pulling that one
have
out.
you whenever you're making different types of points. We gotta have you change your hat every time.
Right.
Like just which Berkey are we getting right now?
You know, I think moving forward, we're gonna need to have to alternate weeks. So like when news drops and it has a slightly negative slant, you guys have to take the negative side, and then
Alright.
I have to be Sally
We
Optimism
have to
over here.
force you to play devil's advocate for the side
For
that
the
you don't
positive
actually
side,
believe
right.
in. Yeah.
Right, like I need to be the cheery-eyed one saying like the sky's not falling, and really letting you guys know, don't worry, everything's gonna be fine.
I'd be so weirded out by
I
that.
think what it might be is like when you're on your way to go play. Yeah, when you're about to go play like a really big game or something, you've got the backwards hat on. You're hyped.
Work attire.
You're excited.
Right.
Yeah, you got your work attire on. Now, like you're probably gonna go to the gym later or whatever, but
Yep.
you're not like on the way to go play, so you're
Right.
not excited and you're like a little bit energy lower. Like
Yeah.
it's-
Wait a minute.
Yeah, you're right.
This was about a movie for arm wrestling.
Oh yeah.
Oh, dude, it was great.
Oh, it was a great movie.
You
You've
just,
got
okay,
to
so
see
this movie had a budget
young
of
kid
this
doesn't
movie had a
understand.
budget of 25 million.
Yeah.
And it
That
got
was
a
a lot
box.
back
It got a
then.
box office of 16.
Right. That's probably because Sylvester Stallone got 20 million to make
So
it.
Exactly.
It
You know
lost
how much
money.
it costs to get Sylvester Stallone. to
Yeah,
make
that
a
was
movie?
like
it's a
one
cult classic,
year.
Landon.
That movie was like 1 year post Rocky 3. I mean, like Stallone was at peak, and like right around Rambo. Stallone was like peak movie star at that
Yeah.
time.
So this is a movie about going to the arm wrestling world championships to win money to
Yeah.
save his son.
How
And if
excited,
I-
how excited are you to watch it?
If I
today?
recall correctly, he was a truck driver. Guapo?
Yeah,
Was that
he
it?
was.
You gotta
Truck driver,
really,
yeah.
you gotta really give Landon an education in 80s movies.
I mean, honestly,
1987.
as somebody who lived through it, you didn't miss anything.
I'm missing
man.
much.
You missed Goonies. You missed.
I haven't
Back
seen
to
the
the
Goonies in
Future.
full. It's true.
Yeah, you missed
There's
E.T.
a lot of good movies.
I
in the
missed
80s.
Back to the
What are we talking
Future.
about here?
I have not seen Goonies.
Spaceballs is maybe Spaceballs and Princess
Ooh,
Bride are maybe the
Spaceballs
only
is a
two
great
that
one, too.
like you could watch and you should watch, but like the majority of people are gonna say don't waste your time on it.
How do you know? How do you
Rain
like
Man was
get
in the 80s. That's a
Spaceballs
good
when you
one.
haven't seen Star Wars?
I mean, it's still funny.
I guess it is, but
the-
it's like
the
you wouldn't
references-
get half the references.
Well, you don't have to watch Star Wars to get those references. Like I
It's
know
much
who.
funnier if you do.
Yeah, sure. I know who Darth Vader is.
Well,
I know
sure.
who Princess Leia is. I know
Yeah.
Chewie.
R2D2. Like I know all the characters.
You know
I've
all
seen
the
enough of
characters.
it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Calm the
Spaceballs is
desert.
great.
You wanna hear-
Yes, comb the desert.
Just because we're talking about movies and shit, you know that Terrence Howard only made $12,000 from Hustle and Flow?
I did
Really?
not.
No, I did not.
I might be the only one here who knows who Terrence Howard is.
I know Terrence Howard.
Yeah.
It's my twin.
It's not your twin.
He was
I
in-
got
they fired him from being in the Iron Man movies.
yes.
They replaced him with Don Cheadle.
Yep. There's
Good choice,
God, there's
honestly.
another movie he made, and he only made like $6K off of it.
So
and it was
he's
like,
broke.
well, at the time he was,
Okay.
but it
They
was.
put it on a tab.
I literally heard it today, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah,
wild.
it's unlucky. All right. Well, let's get into today's strat chat. We're going to be talking about when it's okay to donk lead.
Yeah.
And
Break flow, if you will.
the simple answer is when
Break flow.
when middle pair pairs.
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Always do that.
That's it for
That's
Strat
it
Chat
for
today,
Strat.
everybody.
Well,
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in.
25%. Thank you.
No, if you guys want to get into this a little bit, I can
Yeah, I mean,
layer my thoughts over
I
top.
think just to kind of broach the discussion a little bit, I think that the very, very simple way of looking at this is that it's all about it's all about the idea that if you check, your opponent is just not going to bet very much, right? If you are in a situation where you checking will result in them having a very easy check back at a very high frequency, you're probably going to have to start thinking about having some donk leads. And a lot of that is going to come down to what the board texture is and things like that. But in a very, very simplistic way, if checking back is a super easy decision for your opponent at a very high frequency, you don't want them to be allowed to do that. You don't want to just allow them an easy decision. So you have to start leading some hands in a lot of spots.
Okay, so I guess digging into that a little bit further, whenever we're talking about, because to set this up properly, what we're talking about is like defending the big blind or defending out of position in some capacity, whether it's in a single raise pot or a 3-bet pot, and something happening to the turn dynamic such that
Or the flop. I mean, you can call 3 and then donk the flop,
yeah,
you know?
flop donks I think are a little bit less common, but
Yeah, but they do happen.
Right, yeah. So something about the board texture changes in a significant enough way that it shifts the equity advantage to, let's call it neutral-ish, right? That shift in EV, or equity rather, will incentivize a much greater checking frequency by the in-position player, which will then allow him to realize his equity more frequently. So when we're talking about building a leading strategy to deny that equity realization, what we have to understand is that all strategic options are always going to be built from the top down. So we're always going to start with our value. We're going to curate our value range first, and this is most intuitive to players who are going to start experimenting with these types of lines. You'll want to start to comb out, like, what is the value hand that I can select in this particular spot that wants to lead, because seeing it go check, check is really detrimental. What becomes a little bit more particular, and where I guess my line of questioning is going, is how then do you curate an overall range as far as what you should be donking on specific textures that allow you to do so?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think that if you look at a lot of sims for these types of spots, what's really interesting about it is that when you're out of position, you can actually be a little bit less polar with your aggression than when you're in position, because you're not going to get raised as much. If you're leading from out of position, in position has more of an incentive to just call and play more streets, as opposed to raising and lowering the SPR. So a lot of the time, you're middling to strong draws that otherwise would be, or I guess middling to weak draws, actually, that would otherwise be in a pretty tricky spot if they got raised. They're not going to get raised as much, therefore they get to do a bit more leading. And in addition to that, because part of the reason specifically for having leading ranges is it gives our opponent a little bit more incentive to bet once we check, because we're no longer checking such a nutted range. It's now kind of okay to have a certain amount of fairly weak hands in your checking range, because they don't really care about having to check fold. Like, they don't really have much equity to realize anyway. And then a lot of the middling equity and backdoor equity and things like that would be in kind of an awkward spot if you checked and faced a bet, for example. A lot of that stuff is going to start leading. So you're actually going to be a little bit more linear in some of these spots, as opposed to what you might be in position when you're c-betting, which is you might be betting a slightly more polar range.
Yeah, I think there are a couple points to take away from there that you can kind of think about when you're curating this range. It's, number one, generally donks are going to be for small size. So you're not going to be super polarized in your range construction. You're going to be a lot more linear.
Depending on ranges, betting volume.
Don't.
Well, let's go into that a little bit.
Because what you're saying is,
disregarding that very weird voice, let's talk a little bit about why that is, though, because you're absolutely right that there are going to be some spots where we're going to lead bigger, but a lot of the reason why it doesn't occur that often is because usually it's quite rare for us to call or check call on a previous street and then end up with a polar range on the next street, up with a lot of nut hands and a lot of trash that might decide.
It generally just
like people might think that, like, oh, well, I don't do this very often, so I need to go big, but it's actually not the case, right?
It's not necessarily the case, no.
It's not about frequency, it's about range construction.
Yeah, and quite a lot of the spots where you are leading, you're going to be leading like 30, 50, 70% of your range, and you're not just going to be doing it with very specific hands. There's not that many spots where you want to check 80% or 90% of your hands and then specifically lead 10% or something like that.
It's too
most of the time when you are leading, it's going to be because it's a situation where the board texture, for whatever reason, heavily favors your range. And as a byproduct, you're going to have a lot of hands that have middling to good equity, which want to lead for the sake of pushing that equity and giving in position some slightly awkward spots. But you aren't necessarily going polar with it, because you don't have a polarized range.
Right.
You know, when you have a lot of hands that are condensed into one region of the deck, you know, when you defend a big blind, it comes 7-6-4. You know, when you have a lot of hands in that area and you have a lot of straights and things like that, you don't have a polar range. You have a very linear or a pretty kind of middle strength range overall, because even your overcards have equity.
Right.
And there's not really very much in that spot that is actually a stone bluff, you know, so you're not going polar, you're not doing it at a low frequency, so you're mostly going to go fairly small. But there are, as Landon says, there are some spots where in a very specific formation, maybe sometimes when it goes check call flop, check call turn, and then like the river brings a flush or something like that, there are some spots where you either have a flush or you just have one pair, you know, because either you check called with a flush draw twice and you got there, or you don't have a flush and your one pair is pretty weak, you know. So there are,
I think
there
you
are
can
some weird
generalize
spots
it.
like that.
Generally speaking, it's going to be when SPR has been drastically reduced and ranges have been condensed to basically only contain certain subsections of hand classes. So similar to the example you just gave, it's like you land on river in a spot where it would be very hard to get this far with hands that weren't either a pair or a flush draw.
Right.
Now all of a sudden what you're going to find is the SPR is going to be relatively low and it's just going to go check at a high frequency. So we might donk jam for like pot, right? These things occur. It happens on turn a lot in like 3-bet pots where, you know, a range may be condensed. You might arrive at a flop SPR of 5, face a large bet, call. Now the board texture changes drastically. And like, you know, the ace of spades falls on the turn, completing not just the flush, but also reducing any nut flushes your opponent may have. Now you're super condensed to these really strong hands. You might lead with a block here.
Those are
or sorry, lead with a larger size.
those
here,
are some
like
weird.
2E.
There's some fun weird spots where you can find like the check call donk jam turn, or like there's not a ton of spots where it comes up, but there definitely are some, and it a lot of the time is going to be, like you say, just a question of being mindful of the changes in the board texture, the specific changes in the board texture, what it does to each range, and also in particular when you're looking at a spot where your opponent is playing somewhat far away from a well-rounded strategy on a previous street. So if they're, for example, if they're 3-betting a range that's very heavy on high cards and doesn't ever have any suited connectors or low pairs in it, you can get into a spot where when the flop comes 7-6-5, they literally can never have 2-pair or better. And so it's such a ridiculously good spot for your range that you end up donking at quite a high frequency.
Right. So kind of where I was going with this was I've ran not necessarily the same spot, but this is low jack versus big blind and button versus big blind. So low jack versus big blind, it's 30. And then this is button versus big blind at 70. But here's a spot where low jack check calls, or big blind check calls a bet versus low jack, and the turn is like an offsuit 7. So we'll see here is big blind facing a low jack range because the range is tighter. When big blind does decide to go for a lead, we do choose the polar lead option as we're trying to say that we have 7x plus, and ace x for the most part isn't going to be in there for betting volume. Ace jack is going to be the only ace x that we're going to have to mildly protect ourselves if an ace river does come or things along those lines. But then if you're looking at this spot,
but again, this is an SPR. This is an SPR equation, right? Like if this were at 100 effective, you wouldn't lead for.
I think
2E.
you would. I think you would. And I'll look at it in a second. But where I was going with this was range construction wise. When we look at big blind versus button from 70 effective, we'll see here that versus the button open range, which is extremely wide, the big blind lead size is going to be quarter pot, where now we don't just only break our strategy into 7x or nothing. But because the range is so much tighter from the low jack, we are going to go for a bigger lead size. But let's see how much I can be good at what I do. I'm kind of mildly going on the fly, but not really.
I would say keep the original sim and literally just change the SPR. Just like manually edit the stacks. And
just change stacks.
Keep the exact
ranges.
ranges. Yeah.
Okay.
If you just load up what you just had.
Yeah. So if I go to change, well,
I also think it's like not.
Oh, it went away. What's up?
I just think in general it's like not great to demonstrate this stuff using MTT format because it's so much less chip EV dependent, right? Like the things that are going to influence leads are going to be so very different than actual chip EV sims, where the incentive for leads is largely going to be the specific concentration to the board texture change that your range possesses, as well as the SPR manipulation.
I think that's true to a
So turn
to a
just so my flowers here. If it's SPR 100, turn size is 2E for 200%.
Okay.
That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Man, I can't say I've ever found the 2x pot turn donk before.
Isn't this range a byproduct of a 30 big blind defense?
Well, it's just 30 big blind defense, sure, but more so the point of I can also change it back to 100 big blinds effective for The big blind range isn't going to change very much. The only difference is going to be like the low jack range a little bit.
Okay.
But the point being here, if we do decide to lead versus the
I just assumed it
tighter
would change.
range,
Well, I just assumed it would change your flop defense strategy.
as in having more check raises.
More check raises, more check calls. I don't.
It would, but I don't think that there's going to be that much that changes about what 7x specifically is going to do. I think at almost all stack sizes, I would expect 7x to play heavily check call and not very much
Yeah,
check raise
I
on
would
that
just
board.
expect to see more ace-x leadings, I guess.
Well,
but maybe that's incorrect.
when you're shallower.
When you're deeper.
Oh, when you're deeper.
But maybe that's just incorrect.
I think the issue here is the range that opens for low jack is so
Yeah.
much tighter than button, where you
Yeah.
do lead for
Yeah,
quarter
yeah,
versus
right,
button,
right.
but it's because they're opening 60% of the deck.
Right,
But
yeah.
versus low jack, when they open
You
25,
just get more value
I
for
think
your
that's what it
ace-x.
is. I think
Yeah.
if you look at the indifference points, I would bet that versus a small lead, a lot of the time what we're keeping indifferent against button is like a lot of their best king highs and a lot of their stuff that is still the best hand against a lot of the bottom of our flop check call range. Whereas I would think against low jack, we are probably targeting like kings through eights for indifference by making a really big bet with with a range that like we're not going to be able to pressure an ace that much, but we are going to be able to take a lot of their pretty high equity bluff catchery portion and make it indifferent versus this big size. It might even be that at some formations, an ace does start to become indifferent if they just never really have much of a 7x themselves.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting. So when we get to the higher depth, where are we starting to pull our bluffs from? Because obviously the leading the 7 large
it's
is
just going to
very
be
intuitive.
it's going to be the wheel draws, right? Like 5-4.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? You know what's also a really big factor here that we didn't really bring up, but it seems almost too obvious to me now. It's a lot of it's about how much 7x the razor is going to have.
Yeah, you have a huge concentration to 7x here, obviously.
Right, but I mean, like when you're against button,
They have 7x.
They have more
offsuit.
7x.
part of the reason we lead smaller is because they have 7x a lot more.
Correct, yeah.
When we're against low jack, they almost never have it. So now it puts us in a position where most of their range is now bluff catching
It's
against
just
our
ace-x
7x.
that's really mad, right?
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
sevens.
exactly. Ace-x is really mad. There's like a tiny bit of 7x, but they have so little that it really does put our range in a position where we can leverage that 7x advantage to put them in some tough spots across 2 streets. But
yeah, that's
when they're
interesting.
on-
I
when
think a
they're on
lot of
button,
people find the lead there, but I think they find it for small.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Well,
I
lead small
agree.
does nothing as ace-x doesn't care.
Right.
But versus button, they have so much more king high, queen high, things like this that need to float.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist as much facing a lead from big blind versus low jack.
It's funny. I played a hand at this.
Kings is a pure call.
in that.
You unblock everything, bro.
I played a hand in
River King.
that Venetian final table recently, or just before the final table. It was against Christina Gollins, Baby Shark on Twitter. She opened and I flatted the small blind, and it came like queen 7-3. I think I had 7-8 suited. It came like queen 7-3. She bet. Turn came as 7, and I found a big donk lead. And I look afterwards. I thought like, I probably shouldn't lead big there. But actually, looking at it now, I probably should, because she was opening from a position where she doesn't have very much 7x at all. So I thought my play in retrospect was like probably not great. But actually, looking at that sim there for the turn 7. It probably was a bit better than I thought, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's more so when you're leveraging an advantage that you have over an opponent that it's not that they're capped, right? Because he still has aces and quads,
right.
but the proportion of offsuit 7x and suited 7x big blind's going to check call with versus the bet is going to be higher than the in positions player of having a 7 in the first
I think
place.
the meaningfulness behind the lead on that particular board is very different. Also, you're basically leading in lieu of check raising. And you're doing so with like a very specific subset of your range that isn't really interested in realization so much as it is interested in maximizing a TV. Most lead spots are taking a much more linear range and ensuring that you're able to maximize the ability to realize, because as you kind of mentioned, you're going to have a lot of situations where like you have a pretty weak draw, but it's strong enough to continue, but not versus a large size. And these scenarios where like turn card pairs or something to that effect that allows you to create a donk lead strategy, what ultimately ends up happening is when you check and face a bet, all of those hands that could have otherwise been fit into a donk are now forced to fold. And you don't really gain anything from the hands that could have donked for value by putting them in your check
And
range.
isn't like when that middling card pairs, now the imposition players check frequency is going to go up.
It should
right?
go up,
So
yeah.
so you're not going to get as many opportunities for a check raise
Correct.
when you do have the 7.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here as well is if you look at a sim and you allow a donk bet and a check, what will happen is If the donk bet is allowed and you're going to be donking at a fairly high rate, once you check, your opponent is still going to bet at a certain rate because your checking range is not the same as it would be if you had no donking range at all. If you run one of those sims and then you stop out of position from donking, if you get rid of the donk bet altogether, now versus that checking range, in position is going to check back a huge amount because that checking range includes so much 7x that they can't continue value betting the same hands that they would do. If
Like
out of
these
position,
weaker ace X's.
yeah, exactly.
Are gonna, like check back.
If we're out of position and we're donking a 7 a lot, then when we check, they know we don't have as much 7x.
Right.
So they can continue betting with ace king, ace queen, etc. If we check our entire range, they know that we have a bunch of 7x, so they don't even value bet ace king and ace queen that often.
Right.
Yeah, and this is like the circular strategy iterating, right? Like once we recognize that somebody never donks, we are forced to like check back at a higher frequency and bet much tighter. But the second that we realize that strategy shifts, now all of a sudden we get to shift our strategy again and play versus two different subsets, right? So I think this is really critical or a really big takeaway because in most of the lower stake environments, you probably don't face that donk lead ever, which means that they're largely devoid of it, which also means that you shouldn't be value betting quite as thin on the turn. And this is what leads to the just pay problem, right? Is
He loves the just pay propaganda.
Well, it's the just pay problem, right? Because what happens is too often you take ace king and you value bet it on the ace 7 deuce 7 card and you get check raised. And then I'm here in your head saying just pay. But like you shouldn't pay because this person doesn't have a donking range.
You shouldn't pay because you shouldn't bet. Like
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
But sorry, I should rephrase. You should pay as a byproduct of correcting for the mistake that you already made, right? Like what ultimately ends up happening is you get this proposition where, okay, you did something you weren't supposed to do, and now you faced an undesirable response, but you still have the hand that you have. And it's just really good fucking hand. So like, sure, you ran into a 7 some of the time, but it's no different than if you had checked back now and faced a river bet. Like you're obviously going to call with that hand.
Right.
So you pay this street and then maybe you make a tight fold on the next street because good things can still happen. They could just check the river or you could improve to another ace.
You don't just like make the mistake of betting ace king and then make the additional mistake of then folding it to a raise. Like it's the worst outcome.
I'll quickly, this will take 2 seconds to pull up a solve where we'll just use the low jack, a big blind 30, where the size is 2E for the big blind, where we see here, this is the strategy, right? You say you have a 7 or you don't. Your bluff's coming from your low wheel gutters that unblock the high cards that now have to fold. But if we remove the lead option and just be like, okay, like I don't think the guy I'm playing plays leads.
Right.
So if we just make it pure check, now we'll see that the low jack
checks back everything.
Yep, 100%.
Everything.
Yeah,
100%.
literally 100% check back.
Can't bet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, can't bet. So now if they do have leads, you can bet as low jack sometimes because they lead a 7 a lot. So now the size you choose, if you do decide
They just
to
have
bet,
less 7s when they check.
is bigger.
Right.
Well, the pure check back here has to be somewhat a byproduct of SPR, right? Because you would want to bet a 7 if the SPR is like 10.
You're saying for imposition?
Yes.
Well, imposition, you're saying, okay, if you're saying at 100 effective, if low jack plays a range check, potentially some amounts of bets.
I
but
mean, I
probably,
guess if he just doesn't really have much 7x at all, then maybe it's not that big of a deal to check back
You
here.
might start to get to the point where specifically like king 7 and maybe like aces full and deuces, well, you don't even have deuces full, but like some stuff might start to want to bet when we're super deep because we might be so deep that we can't even stack a 7 like very often. But I think as long as we're shallow enough that villain is, you know, the out of position player is still going to get stacks in with a 7 at a decent rate. It wouldn't surprise me if we do still play a very high frequency check.
I think it'll be very high. I'm just curious if it'll be pure.
Yeah. One thing I would also like to test after this is I want to look at a sim where we have the in position player using a large size on flop on a very sort of connected-y kind of board. So
like 10-9-5.
Yeah, it's literally the exact board I was going to say. If we look at 10-9-5.
Yeah, same idea. Basically just check and then some polar strats where you have like wheel or 7x, but mostly just range checking.
So you do get the
2% bet.
You basically
It's
check,
small, but
if
like,
you do decide to bet with 7x or like aces or
There
like
we
your
go.
wheel draws, you just go for 2x pot.
Look at me nailing the king 7, aces full. Like, there we go. We got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Gold star for Hunt.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you do have deuces now with that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I guess we do. But anyway, the type of spot, Landon, if you could pull up like a connected board like a 10-9-5 or something with a flush draw, and then see if in position bets like pot or something like that, if in position bets big and then it goes check call and then the turn is like
A 9.
yeah,
Like
well,
9 of
no,
clubs?
I was gonna say a straight card, like
Okay.
a 7 or an 8.
My fear is that you're not gonna have as many leads just because offsuit broadways connect for the low jack.
Yeah, maybe 10-9-5 is not the best example. Maybe like if it was
Like 7-8 or 8-7 deuce turn 5.
yeah, that's probably really good. Yeah,
Okay.
let's do that. Let's go 8-7 deuce turn 5.
Yeah, because turn 5 is better than turn
Right.
6 because 10-9 will still exist.
Yeah,
for the,
exactly. So something like this. Basically, we just want a spot where in position is able to bet big on flop, and then out of position is going to be quite condensed when they check call to a lot of hands that interact with that texture in a way where they're going to turn some straights, 2 pairs, open-enders, things like that. I think you're going to see a lot of leads in those spots too. And it's partly because the big blind can have the straights there where in position can't.
So here, like low jack is going to go for a 3E size of like 116 if
Yeah,
they're going to
okay.
decide to bet just because of the
That seems
overpair
good,
advantage.
yeah. So they're going
So
over
check,
bet on the
bet,
flop.
call, turn, flush complete or no?
Let's try flush complete first. Like try 5 of hearts, let's say.
This is 100 big blind effective.
Yeah, this is 100 big
They'll
blinds.
call it 5 of hearts.
See if
Now there's going to be
donks.
a lot of leads for small because the high card offsuit is going to be really mad.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you can see now, like I was cheating,
Quarter pot.
25%. So you're not going to go polar lead as you just have an equity advantage if you do decide to bet.
What about like 5 of clubs, like the 5 without the flush draw? Because I think in position is going to have some flushes.
Probably less leads,
Probably
but
less leads,
but
you think?
quarter pot. Yeah, like probably not a big size. Like 25.9, 20.5.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. But yeah, I mean these are spots. This is maybe not the exact perfect example, but I've definitely seen some spots where you have in position betting big, and then it becomes less about the the 7 is really an extreme
Yeah, so
card.
7's like a really good one that we check call with, but because we have such a good range, like not good range advantage, but we have a lot of 7x and 8x, we want to bet all of our hands now to just target the high card broadways for the low jack, as they've already broken their range down into overpairs and high card bluffs, right? So now when we go quarter pot, we just get so much good to start happening from this offsuit region and these suited ace-x backdoors that didn't materialize.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense.
So now it's like, okay, 7 here, great. We go small, but on ace 7 deuce turn 7, they're now at an ace. They're capped at an ace, so we need to do something about that and go bigger.
I guess the point that I was trying to kind of hone in on with looking at a straight completing card is that the other type of scenario where the out of position caller can have certain hands that the in position player can't is quite often going to be when they have certain straight draw combos that in position can't. Because when the flush card completes, yeah, there's probably going to be at least some flushes in both players' ranges. And then when the trips completes, obviously there's going to be a lot of spots where out of position can have more trips. But the other situation that people, I guess, don't find the donk leads in very many situations, I think, it's going to be when they can have the straight and in position cannot, right? And I think that's something that is pretty noteworthy because you do see a lot of donks in those spots. Yeah, is that a 9?
That's an 8.
That's an 8. Okay, so that's trips.
Top card pairs and trips
Right.
is going to be more prevalent for the big blind as we just have so much 8x suited and 8x offsuit. Where if we look at the low jack range, the amount of
We just
8x
have
that's going to exist is going to be 8-7 if you're lucky, low frequency 8x, and then some overpairs where.
What about try a 9 of clubs? I'm really curious because there's Jack 10 in both ranges, but big blind also has 6-5 a lot more.
I would imagine like
Might be some leads
not
here.
many.
Let's see.
Offsuit Broadway kind of annoying. Yeah, not as
Oh,
many.
there's a little bit. There's a
Enough,
tiny bit. It's
though.
just not quite at the same frequency, obviously. But basically, the 8-7 deuce might not be the perfect example in this formation, but there are going to be plenty of spots where the straight completing is a signifier that we should start having some donks as well.
Honestly, this equity chart right here is pretty sick. Where like you look at a turn, like let's just go back to the 8 where we have a range lead. We'll see here that the big blind just wrecks him.
Yeah.
Like this line right here is big blind, and then low jack is the green one. So on an 8, it's like, okay, this is really good for big blind, and because it's so good, we can go small.
Yeah.
But now if we look back at like ace 7 deuce, mildly like solver stimming, but that's
Solver stimming, that's a thing.
that's me. Well, for me it is.
Yeah.
Like if you look at a 7, you'll see that the range chart's probably gonna look like very polar at the top for big blind.
Oh wow, that's
So now big blind just kind of does really well when we have a good hand, and then low jack still has some decent hands. but the matter of ace-x is still going to be prevalent.
A fun way to identify polarity in these range graphics, if you're someone who's not really accustomed to using them very much, is anytime you see those really jagged lines, anytime you see like a big drop off in equity somewhere, anytime you see like that big corner you can kind of see in the graph there, that's a sign that there's some region of equity where a player's range is drastically dropping off once it gets beyond a certain point. So it's a good thing to look for because it kind of implies some degree of polarity sometimes. And then when you see the really smooth graph, when you see like a very straight-ish kind of line, then it's a sign that all the hands are a little bit more close together in equity and there's not as much polarity going on. So
to be clear, with those like sharp drop-offs, they're at specific hand classes.
Exactly,
So like you'll see like, maybe the drop-off is from trips to top pair or something
and
like
in
that.
this case, the big sharp drop there is from a 7 to just an ace, right? It's like any 7 is way stronger than an ace, but an ace is way stronger than anything worse than an ace. So there's another drop-off after you get past the ace.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you
So
got there?
I'm just looking at river strats on like a brick where you would think because on some turn, like some frequency, the big blind should check some 7x, right? Like 9-7's going to check a lot, 8-7's going to check a lot. I was looking at river strats on an offsuit 4 just to kind of see like what size does big blind want to use if they do have a 7. But the point necessarily isn't about trying to find a range that fits your 7x, but bet your one size that allows you to bet your ace x's as well sometimes to get value from kings and queens.
We're in the check turn line now,
Correct.
right? Okay.
So now we go for block to not induce a range with your 7x, but mostly try to bucket your ace x's as well, where I do this way too fucking much, where I'll try to like make custom sizes for hands that would make sense, where it's like, okay, if I have an ace, I can block and then call a raise. And if I have a 7 or a bluff, like a 4-5 or whatever, I'll find a way to overbet or try to make them fold or get max value from an ace. But the solver just wants to play one size and protect it all.
I think that makes a lot of sense because I don't think that this is on the ace-7 deuce 7-4, right? Yeah, I don't think that an overbet does anything really to the ace-x region of making much of it indifferent. I think it just gets to play pretty easily where it's linear, right? Like the best ace is probably just going to call and then so on down the line. And then you give really easy decisions to hands like kings or queens or whatever the case may be, where they would basically be indifferent facing any bet. What I like to do in these spots, and I notice it works so incredibly well, is when you bucket everything to a block here, like say the 40% size, you get to like maximize this bleed over effect from your top pair to your trips, but also you get to create this secondary strategy of already having a counter versus raises. And that's so important because I think the instinct is like you land here with a hand like 5-4 or 5-6 or something like that, something that had a backdoor, right? That you chose not to donk on the turn. And you land there and you're like, fuck, I'm at stone bottom. Like I need to do something to try to win this pot. And you land somewhere between like, well, I'm not sure if an overbet's going to work or not, but I have 7x in my range, therefore I should just overbet type of thing and apply max pressure to top pair. And then you get snapped by like ace-9 and you're like, fuck me, this is never working. But what you could have done instead is block. Yeah, but it just doesn't, practically speaking. So like what you do instead is you block and in position gets greedy with hands like ace king, ace queen some of the time. Right.
Like they should pure raise. And that's part of the like EV of strat.
Exactly. And then you just say like,
bet.
okay, I have 6 high. I can fold some of the time, but I also block all of his check back 7x perhaps, or I block a lot of it.
The block 3-bet line is a really fun line when you pull it off.
It's one that I feel like is for me so overbluffed and for the pool so underbluffed.
Yeah.
Like they just don't really find it.
I got to say that
bottom.
the hand I'm probably most proud of in recent months was pulling off a block 3-bet against like 3 opponents in the win 10K. Just like block 3-bet all in and they both snap fold. And I was just like,
I think
that was good. That was a good bluff.
So the reason why it's so under bluffed is because like the environment, especially like the environment that I play in or these smaller stakes, I mean, river raises are just so nutted.
It's not just that. The other aspect of it is in order to, if you're not really well versed in your strategies, in order to find the block to begin with, you almost always have showdown value. Almost no one's going to take 6 high,
right,
and fit it into a block.
Yeah.
So now this is weird because I think it's under bluffed, but I'm also really good at sussing out the times that it is bluffed because I might hold like key cards that block their value. And I just think like, okay, well, for them to have started with a block, they very likely had showdown value. And I block this portion of their range that's the nuts. I guess this is the time where they just happen to have like, you know, a counterfeit 2 pair fitted into a block because it still wins sometimes. I raise with the overpair and then they go for the jam and it's like, oh, nope, call. You know, I think
it also kind of speaks to the fact that in certain environments, you don't see a lot of like certain sizings, right? So like there might be a lot of games in which river raises are always nutted, but the reason river raises are always nutted is because nobody ever bets like quarter pot on
exactly.
river. Nobody ever like blocks on river, right? And
That's
so as soon as you
too.
start doing the thing that people don't usually do, you're now creating a completely separate part of the tree that sometimes doesn't exist because if you're just observing the environment and you're not active in it, you're not going to see it because everybody in the environment doesn't recognize that it's something that should be part of their game tree. You know?
Yeah, I think
My
true.
fear of the B40 is they just like always just snap with the ace X. And I'm like, well, I could have tried to make you fold that a little bit harder. But the point is you're trying to allow yourself a cheaper bluff size because getting that bluff through for B40 is pretty sick.
Right.
And then if you do have 7X and they raise, you can leverage your 7X advantage and make ace king.
Right,
really
like you
bad.
weren't trying to make ace X indifferent.
Yeah, and this is a big thing, I think, that particularly in tournaments where you've got a lot of spots where you have really wide ranges that people need to kind of be aware of, that you don't always have to try to make them fold everything. You know, like it's completely okay to just have 5 high and try to make them fold king high and just be happy when that happens. And then if they have better than king high, they're never going to fold, but you just don't
I think
care.
that's a big aspect to river bluffing in particular is understanding where the upper threshold is of hands that you can make indifferent.
Yeah.
And just recognizing like they're going to call some of the time, but they're going to be unhappy to do so.
Hey man, for what it's worth, you've got to peel a 6-5 backdoor versus low jack for quarter pot in the first place.
That's true. Well, maybe it wasn't the best example, but
no,
you
but
get
you
the
do.
point.
No. It's a pure continue.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Like it's a good example, but like if those peels from low jack don't exist, and you pure check turn by the way, because you have no equity, you
Right.
can't bluff it. You can bluff wheel draw. Like if you have, if it's ace-7 deuce, you have 5-4, but having 5-6, you can't win. You have to check, hope they check back high Broadway, and then go for B40 to make
Right.
them fold it. But you have to peel that in the first place, and if that peel doesn't happen, the river node for out of position is actually going to be stronger.
Yeah.
Cue the J Little tweet. But like I would have missed it too. Like I was playing a trainer spot where I folded 8-9 backdoor on like King Jack 5 and versus button quarter pot and it just says like error. I'm like, oh, I guess I missed a fucking sick nit.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Any other major takeaways you guys want to touch on?
I don't think anything big. You know, when you start looking at tournament spots with ICM, there's more donking, but it gets way into the ICM weeds, so we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, that was kind of why I wanted to differentiate, not because I don't think it's valuable. Of course it is. I just think that it's a whole other area of study.
It is.
That's like rather complex.
It's just, yeah, I mean, for the first half of a tournament or so, you're still going to be playing chip EV anyway, so you can still use this stuff.
Yeah. I think that, you know, when it comes to like tournament training versus cash training and stuff like that, I think it is important to have similar structures that you follow, but differentiate based off of the arena. Like if we were to put out a donking course, I wouldn't want it to be a panacea or a one size fits all type of thing.
Well,
right?
it's not.
That's what I mean. Like you would want to do it for 100 big blind, deeper effective SPRs, et cetera, and then you would want to do one that's like ICM dependent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
I
just-
think the driving factors behind where a donking strategy exists at each individual node are always going to be consistent, but the actual application of it is going to be very, very different because the ranges that are going to go into each spot are going to be different.
Right.
The SPRs are going to be different. like you
Exactly.
say. Yeah.
And the risk premium is going to be very different.
Yeah, of
There
course.
is none
Of
in
course.
cash, you
Yeah.
know, but it's something to very strongly consider
I mean,
depending on where
maybe,
you're in the MPT.
excuse me, maybe you could make, oh, what the hell? I don't know my voice. Maybe you could make the argument that in cash, if you're like playing underrolled, there's a risk premium.
Yeah. Really difficult to map though. We actually spoke a lot about that on Tuesday when I did the ode to shot taking, but it's very difficult to model. It's very, and to be fair, I do think that there's probably some value in it, and probably maybe something that I should consider putting a little bit more time and effort into. This notion of like modeling being well rolled versus under rolled, and like the mentality shifts as well as like the strategic shifts that you can actually take to the table. but it's really complex because it's a lot of speculation.
If you ever want to build some actual math models for it, I'm pretty confident that I know some people on a Discord server who could help you with that.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that we would struggle to quantify is what tangible metric we utilized to measure risk premium.
It would probably be
risk of ruin, right?
They would probably be using like Kelly criteria and stuff. Like there would probably be some element of that.
You need to. Yeah, I think like prime dope calculations are also another.
I guess all I'm really saying is that someone with more math ability than me could probably find a way to blend these models together.
Yeah, for sure.
And figure it out.
Kelly criteria is shockingly aggressive.
It is very aggro, yes.
By Kelly criteria, I've been properly rolled for just about everything I've done based off of measurable win rate.
You should call it the Berkey criteria.
Right. But the difficulty becomes like the measurable win rate, right? Like even if you are an 8 big blind per 100 winner, if you're under rolled into a game that you feel like that's your win rate in, it might just drop.
Right.
It might just drop simply due to the inability to execute.
Yeah, exactly.
And the in-game decisions that you have to change. But that's going to do it for us today. Hunt, as always, appreciate you joining us.
No problem.
I can promise you we would not have had that World Series conversation without you here to be the level head.
You would not have given a shit, so I'm glad to be here.
It's not that I don't give it. I give a shit for the people. I do.
We always care about the people.
It's just more so that it would have been Lamanna and I barking at each other instead of having a mediated conversation.
Yeah, there we go.
Which I appreciate. So don't forget, we do have an academy coming. Well, we have 2 academies coming up in May. If you are planning on prepping for the WSOP, Hunt will be running a 4-day MTT academy at the end of May. I believe that's the 26th to the 28th.
27th to the 30th.
Okay, I was close. 27th to the 30th. We are also running a cash academy May 23rd to the 25th. That one I'm more confident in the dates on. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lamanna. But
23rd to 25th, you say?
Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay. Be sure to head to academy.solveforwhy.io. Check out those 2 academies. Seats are filling up fast. Also, don't forget that Jill, our wonderful dealer from both the Academy and Poker Out Loud, is now executing a dealer academy to prepare anybody who wants to get ready for the WSOP or otherwise. We will be helping with job placement. I had somebody reach out to me today. He said he wants to look into it. His interest is getting a job at Champions in Houston, which, hey, I know the owner. Just saying. So we're going to try to take care of everybody who gets involved. Be sure to head to academy.solveforwhy.io. Click on the banner above if you have an interest in the Dealer Academy, and you'll get more details there. That's going to do it for us. We'll be back. Is tomorrow Friday?
Yep.
Okay, we'll be back tomorrow, tentatively noon Pacific. Small chance we go to the evening. I'll let you guys know ASAP. Follow us on Twitter at onlyfriends_pod. We'll see you guys all then.
Peace.
Peace.